Have you ever noticed how some people hold power without raising their voice, without chasing, without even explaining themselves? They don't plead. They don't fight for attention. They simply withdraw. They disappear gracefully. And suddenly, the room shifts. People lean in. Questions arise. Their absence feels louder than others' presence. It's not magic, and it's not manipulation. It's the art of pulling back, a subtle but radical act of reclaiming your energy, because you've been taught that presence equals value. That to matter, you must be available to be loved. You must be accessible to be respected. You must be loud. But what if that's not true? What if silence was your strategy? Not as a game, not as revenge, but as protection. What if stepping back wasn't retreat, but recalibration? What if stillness was where your power actually lives? You see, most people don't realize that they're hemorrhaging energy every single day, not because others are stealing it, but because they're leaking it through over-explaining, over-apologizing, overreacting. We trade our attention for likes, our silence for peace, our truth for acceptance. We leak our life force just to feel included. But at what cost? This video is not about ghosting. It's not about detachment for the sake of control. It's about conscious, energetic boundaries. It's about learning when to speak and when to remain silent, when to lean in and when to pull back, not from fear, but from alignment, because power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's invisible, and silence, when chosen with awareness, can shake the room more than any word ever could. Today, we're going to unlearn the patterns that made you perform and relearn the truth that sets you free. You don't need to prove your value. You just need to stop giving it away. Let's begin. Some people speak without saying a word. They hold gravity in a room, not through dominance, but through discipline, the discipline to withhold. They don't chase. They don't over-explain. They don't prove. They simply return to themselves. They simply pull back, quietly, precisely, deliberately, and suddenly, everything changes. People notice. They wonder. They adjust. That's not manipulation. That's energetic balance being restored. It's what happens when you stop leaking your power into spaces that never learned how to hold it. Let's be clear. This isn't about ego. It's about alignment. Understanding how human psychology works. Because here's the truth. We value what isn't constantly available, not because we're selfish, but because the human brain is wired to pay attention to what pulls away. When you're always there, always responding, always on call, your presence becomes background noise, familiar, assumed, expected, not appreciated. And that's where energetic erosion begins. But when you pull back, not out of punishment, but precision, you disrupt the unspoken contract. You stop feeding the machine that's been fueled by your constant giving. Your energy becomes rare. Your absence becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, people begin to feel what your presence used to give them for free. Take something as mundane as a group chat. You're the one who always replies. Quick, thoughtful, available. Until one day you stop. No drama. No passive aggression. Just silence. You leave the message on, seen, and wait. Suddenly, everything okay. You've been quiet. Did I say something wrong? The shift is immediate. People feel your withdrawal more than they ever acknowledged your offering. That's the power of withholding. Not to manipulate, but to re-pattern. To interrupt the feedback loop where your energy was taken for granted, where your reactions were automatic, where you became emotionally predictable. Because when people know exactly how you'll respond, they stop respecting your boundaries. They start programming around your patterns. You think you're showing up with love, but are you? Or are you performing safety at the cost of your sovereignty? Let's zoom out. Think of social media. You post something vulnerable, no reply. You reach out, no response. But you see them online, active, engaged, just not with you. So you pull back. You stop reaching not to punish, but to return. A space for recalibration, not revenge. And what happens? Eventually they might come back, or they won't. Either way, you've already come back to yourself. Because absence creates space, and space creates inquiry, and inquiry reawakens respect. But only if you don't rush to fill it again. In a world addicted to immediacy, delayed response is often mistaken for emotional distance. But it's not distance. It's discernment. You're not being cold. You're being clear. You're not withholding love. You're holding your frequency. And that shift in posture energetically changes everything. Now, let's get practical. This is where we introduce the 48-hour silent reset. Pick one relationship, one dynamic where you feel yourself giving too much emotionally, mentally, energetically, and pause. No ghosting, no punishment. Just stop volunteering your nervous system. Stop explaining. Stop initiating. Stop responding instantly. Give yourself 48 hours of pure energetic observation, not to create reaction, but to reclaim clarity. During this time, don't announce anything. Don't explain. Just withhold. Notice what arises inside you. The urgency to fix, the guilt for being unavailable, the fear of being forgotten. These are all signals, not of who you are, but of who you've been trained to be. The compulsive caregiver, the emotional sponge, the peacekeeper at the cost of inner peace. And here's the truth. Your worth is not proven through overextension. It is revealed through self-respect. Silence is not a wall. It's a recalibration chamber. It doesn't mean you're abandoning others. It means you're finally choosing not to abandon yourself. Because energy, like water, takes the shape of its container, and when your boundaries are leaky, your essence spills into every crack until there's nothing left to hold for yourself. So in these 48 hours, sit with the discomfort. Feel the twitch of old programming. Let the silence stretch. Because that space you're creating, it's not empty. It's sacred. It's where your nervous system returns to coherence. It's where your self-trust grows roots. It's where the external noise loses power and your internal compass begins to recalibrate. This isn't about becoming unavailable. It's about becoming intentional. It's about choosing when and how you give. And to whom. Because love is not a free-for-all. Your emotional presence is not a subscription service. It's a sacred offering, and it must be met, not managed. So ask yourself honestly, Where am I giving too fast? Where am I speaking to be heard rather than to be true? Where am I filling silence that doesn't need to be filled? Withholding is not passive aggression. It's energetic leadership. It's saying, I will no longer spend emotional currency in places that don't know how to invest it, and that is the beginning of your return to alignment, to sovereignty, to power without noise. You don't need to raise your volume, only your vibration. So try it. 48 hours of sacred pause, of unapologetic stillness, of holding your energy with the reverence it deserves. And watch not just how others shift, but how you do. Because when you stop filling every space, you finally make room for yourself. Let's go deeper. Because pulling back isn't just about silence, it's about recognizing the invisible agreements you've made, often without realizing it. Every relationship you've ever had carries more than love, affection, or commitment. It carries emotional contracts, subtle, unspoken, often unconscious deals about who plays what role, who reacts, who holds space, who absorbs. And if you've spent most of your life being the strong one, the available one, the one who calms the storm instead of creating it, chances are you've signed contracts you never consciously agreed to. Contracts like, I'll always be the first to say sorry, even when I'm not at fault. I'll listen endlessly, even if no one ever asks how I'm doing. I'll absorb tension so the room doesn't explode. You didn't agree to those roles out loud. You agreed through repetition, through reaction, through the fear of what would happen if you didn't. That's where the real cost lies. Because what others see as connection is often just predictability. And what you think is being loved is often just being useful. Let's say it clearly. They're not connecting with you. They're connecting with your patterns. They know the version of you that reacts a certain way, soothes their guilt, absorbs their chaos, makes peace when no one else will. And when your nervous system is wired for survival, you mistake that routine for love. But here's the twist. Love without freedom isn't love. It's management. And the more predictable you are in emotional situations, the more leverage others have over you. It's not always intentional, but it's always effective. That's the power of emotional access. It's not about how close someone is to you physically. It's about how quickly they can reach inside your inner world and pull a response. How easily they can push your buttons and activate the script you've unconsciously rehearsed for years. Let's talk about trauma bonding. This isn't just about abuse or toxicity. It happens every day, in subtle ways. When someone wounds you and then comforts you, when they cause confusion but you crave their validation, when you're stuck in a cycle of conflict and repair that keeps you emotionally addicted to the hope of change instead of the reality of who they are. Trauma bonding creates connection through volatility, and once it's embedded, the nervous system confuses intensity with intimacy. You begin to think, if it hurts, it must be real. If I react, it means I care. If I walk away, I'm abandoning them. But here's the reality. You're not walking away from love. You're walking away from emotional captivity. This is where emotional access becomes a transaction you never saw. Where your patterns are currency. Where your reactions are the product others depend on. And the more emotionally fluent you are, the easier it becomes for others to tap in, even when you're drained, even when you're done. The truth is, you've been conditioned to believe that emotional availability is always virtuous. But unchecked emotional availability becomes emotional exposure. You become readable, predictable, controllable. And that, right there, is how you lose sovereignty over your nervous system. Let's ground this with something practical. Emotional contract audit. Grab a notebook. Name 3 relationships that feel energetically heavy. Now ask yourself, what emotional role do I play for this person consistently? Do I feel free to say no, delay, or change the pattern without guilt? When I respond, am I reacting from love or reflex? Be honest. You might discover you're in relationships where your reactions are expected, not appreciated, where you're not loved for who you are, but relied on for how you behave. This is where power leaks happen, not in explosions, but in daily compliance. Every time you say yes to emotional labor, your body resists. You reinforce a contract that says, my peace is negotiable, and it's not. It's sacred. You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to cut people off, but you do need to rewrite the contract. And that begins by breaking the pattern. The next time someone pushes, asks, expects, assumes, pause. Ask yourself, am I showing up from love or from fear of being misunderstood? Am I responding or being pulled like a puppet into the same old loop? Because here's the deeper truth. You're not afraid of hurting them. You're afraid of who you'll be if you stop playing the role. That role, the listener, the fixer, the absorber, it's been part of your identity for so long. You've confused it with your essence. But it's not who you are. It's who you became to be safe, to be chosen, to be needed. And that version of you, as adaptive and brilliant as it was, doesn't need to lead anymore. You're allowed to evolve out of being emotionally predictable. You're allowed to reclaim the space between stimulus and response. That space, it's where your power lives. It's where you stop being programmable and start being present. So if you ever felt unseen, unheard, undervalued, check your patterns. Because people respond not to what you say, but to what you habitually do. And once you change that pattern, everything around you recalibrates. This is the real work. Not becoming harder. Not building walls. But building boundaries that say, my nervous system is not open for negotiation. My peace is not your playground. My energy is earned, never assumed. And from that place, you no longer beg for respect. You embody it. Your time is not just a schedule. It's not just hours, minutes, or obligations. Your time is your soul's currency. It's the most precious resource you have. Because, unlike money, you can't earn more of it. Unlike attention, you can't reset it. Once it's spent, it's gone. Forever. And yet, most people spend time like they'll live forever. Not with intention, but with reaction. Not with clarity, but with guilt. We say yes to what drains us. We overextend for things that don't align. We cancel on ourselves to accommodate others, and we call it kindness. But what it really is spiritual bankruptcy. Let's be clear. Every time you say yes to something, your body resists. every time you override your gut to preserve an image, every time you sacrifice rest for obligation, you're making a withdrawal from your energetic account. And here's the hard truth. If you keep doing it, eventually you won't just be tired, you'll be in debt to your own soul. That's what we call soul debt. It's not just exhaustion. It's a chronic feeling of being out of alignment, detached from yourself, resentful of others, and increasingly unable to recognize your own joy. Soul debt shows up as saying yes with a smile, but crying inside, feeling overwhelmed, even after a productive day, resenting people you love because you've given too much, forgetting what you even like when no one needs anything from you. And yet, we normalize this. We applaud hustle. We praise self-sacrifice. We spiritualize martyrdom. But the soul doesn't work that way. It doesn't run on praise. It runs on presence. And when your presence is constantly elsewhere, your energy fractures. Think of your day like a river. Where does the current flow who's drinking from your stream without replenishing it? This is why it's not enough to have a planner. You need a soul-based audit of your time. Time audit, practice. Here's your practice for the next 24 hours. Keep track of how you spend your time, but not just what you do. Track how each thing feels. For every hour, ask, did this restore me or drain me? Did I do this from truth or out of obligation? Did I feel expanded or contracted? You'll start to notice patterns. You'll see how often you trade peace for productivity. How much of your time is reaction, not choice? How often you say yes to avoid discomfort. That's where your soul debt accumulates. Not in one big moment, but in hundreds of micro decisions that tell your spirit, you don't matter right now. Maybe later, but later never comes. Until your body forces the pause, until the burnout hits, until your joy feels like a memory instead of a baseline. And then you wonder, when did I stop feeling like myself? The answer: when your calendar became a to-do list for everyone else's needs and your needs became negotiable. This is where the concept of alignment becomes more than theory, because alignment is not a feeling, it's a frequency, and your time choices determine how close you are to that frequency. The question isn't just, am I busy? The real question is my busy betraying me? So how do you start repairing that debt? You begin with micro boundaries, small, tangible shifts that interrupt the pattern of self-abandonment. Examples: letting a call go to voicemail without guilt. Saying, "Let me get back to you," instead of "sure." Scheduling rest as a non-negotiable part of your day. Leaving a message on unread until you're actually ready to respond. Taking 30 seconds to breathe before replying to anything. Each of these is a deposit, not just in your calendar, in your soul balance. Because when you reclaim your time, you reclaim your sense of inner gravity. You stop orbiting around other people's demands and return to your own center. And when your inner world is organized around what truly matters, your outer world starts to reflect that clarity. Here's a deeper truth. Every time you say yes to something that betrays your inner no, you fracture your energetic integrity. And fractured integrity doesn't just drain you, it magnetizes more chaos. Because, energetically, the universe responds not to what you say, but to what you vibrate. When you live in the frequency of misalignment, you attract more of it. People who expect you to overgive. Jobs that expect you to overwork. Partners who expect you to abandon yourself to stay close. Not because you're cursed, but because your energy keeps broadcasting. I don't protect my time. But when you shift, when you begin to defend your schedule like it's sacred real estate, because it is, everything changes. Respect follows consistency, not declarations. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You need to honor them, and others will either rise to meet you or fall away. Both are answers. Both are protection. So this week, here's your invitation: audit your time as if your soul is watching, because it is. Not with judgment, but with deep longing for reunion. And every time you choose rest over reaction, clarity over convenience, pause over performance, you pay off that soul debt. You start vibrating at the frequency of enoughness, and from that frequency, you stop chasing anything that used to cost you yourself. This is not time management. This is soul stewardship, and it begins right now. You became indispensable because somewhere deep down, you didn't believe you were lovable unless you were needed, not seen, not cherished, needed. And when that belief takes root, helpfulness becomes a disguise, a beautifully convincing one, but a mask nonetheless. Carl Jung called it the persona, the version of yourself you craft to survive, to succeed, to belong. It's not fake, it's adaptive, it's intelligent. You became the person who shows up, who remembers, who fixes, who carries the unspoken weight of the room. Not because you were asked, but because you believed your worth was tied to that role. And the longer you play that role, the more people forget that you are anything beyond it. You're the one who never complains, who takes one for the team, who remembers birthdays, bridges awkward silences, and says, "I'm fine," even when you're not. You're the anchor, the emotional regulator, the unpaid therapist, the glue. But here's what no one tells you. Glue is what holds things together, but it's also what gets buried underneath everything else. And when you're always the glue, you're never the frame. And when your identity is built on being helpful, your silence becomes suspicious. Your needs become too much. Your rest becomes inconvenient. And your absence becomes a problem to solve instead of a boundary to respect. Let's go deeper. In many families, there's the responsible one, the sibling who becomes the third parent, the child who grows up too fast because chaos forced them to. In friendships, you're the planner, the one who keeps the thread going, the check-in person, the "you good" at 11:47 p.m. In romantic relationships, you carry the emotional weight for both people. You explain their moods. You justify their avoidance. You convince yourself they love you because they lean on you. But dependence is not love, and usefulness is not connection. So let's be honest. Have you become so good at functioning that no one remembers to ask how you are? Have you made yourself so reliable that your presence is a given, not a gift? Because when your function is loved more than your being, you slowly disappear behind the very role that made you feel safe. And at first, it feels noble, selfless, even spiritual. But eventually, it starts to feel hollow. Because being needed is not the same as being nourished. And that's where the fracture begins, when your outer life celebrates your helpfulness, but your inner life feels increasingly unseen. You start to wonder, if I stopped performing this role, would anyone still be here? And that question is terrifying, because the truth might be, some wouldn't. Not because they're bad people, but because they've only known the version of you that solves things. You taught them, consciously or not, that your love comes with labor, that your presence comes with service, that your yes is always on standby. And now, you don't know where their love ends and your performance begins. That's not intimacy. That's enmeshment. And you're allowed to break the loop. You're allowed to be loved in your no, in your silence, in your stillness. You're allowed to be cared for, even when you're not contributing, even when you're not earning it with emotional labor. You're allowed to unhook your worth from your role. And that begins by reclaiming something simple but radical, your true self. The part of you that existed before function, before service, before the script. Let's bring this into practice. Identity reclamation exercise. Grab a notebook. Write this sentence at the top. Who am I when I'm not helping? Then pause. Let the discomfort rise. Let the silence speak. And begin to answer, not with titles, roles, or achievements. Not with, I'm a mom. I'm a team player. I'm the one people rely on. Answer with essence. Write down, what do I love when no one is watching? What brings me peace when I'm not being productive? What kind of person am I when I don't owe anyone anything? This isn't easy, because when your identity has been welded to service, you forget how to name yourself without referring to what you give. But this is the work, rebuilding your inner foundation from truth instead of utility. Because when you stop defining yourself by what you do, you finally meet who you are, and that version of you, quiet, whole, honest, doesn't need to perform to be loved. They just need permission to be seen. So, if you've been the strong one, the helpful one, the one who always has it together, here's your permission to put it down. Not forever. Just long enough to remember that you are a person, not a role. And the people who love you will meet you there. Not in your performance, but in your presence. Every trigger you feel isn't just irritation. It's a doorway, a signal, a flare in the nervous system pointing to something unresolved. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you've failed. It means your body remembers what your mind has tried to forget. That's why we say the trigger is the teacher. It's not there to punish you. It's there to show you where your power was handed over, where your peace was interrupted, where a younger version of you is still trying to protect something vulnerable. Because emotional reactivity is one of the most insidious leaks of your energy. Not because feelings are wrong, but because unconscious reaction hands control of your nervous system to the outside world. That's where shadow work begins. Not in blaming, but in noticing what sets you off, who gets under your skin, what words, silences, tones immediately pull you out of center. That discomfort, that's your compass. That's your curriculum. Let's go deeper. Every human being has a built-in survival system. The sympathetic nervous system. Its job is to protect you when your body senses a threat. We know this as fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight, attack, to protect. Flight, run from danger. Freeze, play dead. Shut down. fawn appease to stay safe. These aren't conscious choices. They're physiological defaults. You don't decide to lash out, shut down, or please. Your body decides based on past experiences, especially the ones you didn't process at the time. So what does this mean in everyday life? It means when someone raises their voice, or withdraws affection, or questions your worth, your body may respond as if your entire safety is at stake. And unless you're aware of that moment, you will react. Not from truth, but from conditioning. You'll defend, or collapse, or over-explain, or numb. And each of those reactions leaks energy. It says, I'm no longer in charge. My programming is. But here's the breakthrough. Between trigger and reaction, there is always a pause. And in that pause is where your power lives. Let's make this practical. 5-second breath technique, the sacred pause. Next time you feel yourself getting triggered in conversation, online, with family, at work, before you react, breathe. Not a shallow, distracted breath, a conscious one. Here's how. Inhale for 4 counts, deeply into your belly. Hold for 1 count at the top. Exhale slowly for 6 counts. Repeat this 1 full cycle before saying or doing anything. This 5-second pause does more than calm you. It re-engages your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, logic, and emotional regulation. When you pause to breathe, you're not just managing emotion. You're reclaiming authority over your nervous system. You're saying, I get to choose how I respond. My trauma doesn't get to speak first. With practice, this pause becomes instinctive. It creates space between feeling and behavior. And that space, that's where shadow work lives. Not in endless analysis, not in blaming your past, but in present moment mastery, because you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present enough to witness the moment before it sweeps you away. And here's the truth most people avoid. You can win the argument and lose yourself. Every reaction may feel justified, but not every reaction is worth your peace. So here's your practice. Begin noticing your emotional spikes. Don't judge them, just name them. I'm feeling tight in my chest. I want to interrupt them right now. I feel the urge to defend myself. Then pause. Breathe. Let the wave pass through you without grabbing it. You are not your triggers. You are the observer of them. And in that role, you're no longer powerless. You're sovereign. Here's what Carl Jung would say: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is that making conscious, in real time, in breath, in awareness. And yes, at first, it feels unnatural. It feels like doing nothing when everything in you wants to react. But pause is not nothing. It's the beginning of a new pattern, a new truth, a new contract with yourself, a moment where you stop being a slave to the past and start becoming a steward of your energy. So next time you're triggered, before the text, before the retort, before the retreat, pause, breathe, and ask, what am I defending? What am I avoiding? What would love do right now for me? You won't always get it right. You won't always remember. But the more you pause, the stronger you become, because in stillness, you reclaim the one thing no one should ever control but you, your response. Solitude isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's not exile. It's a sacred return. A pilgrimage back to the parts of you that got buried beneath being the strong one, the available one, the one who always holds it together. We live in a culture that pathologizes solitude. We equate stillness with loneliness. We call it avoidance. We fear it because we've never been taught how to be with ourselves without distraction. But the truth is, if you've lived most of your life performing a role, then isolation isn't just rest. It's recovery. It's where the noise of other people's expectations fades and the signal of your own truth gets louder. This is not about withdrawing out of resentment. It's not cutting people off. It's not reactionary silence. Let's clarify something important. Withdrawal is reaction. Isolation is intention. Withdrawal says, I can't handle this. I'm gone. Sacred isolation says, I'm choosing to pause, not to disappear, but to realign. One is avoidance. The other is awareness. And the difference is everything. Because when you isolate intentionally, you're not abandoning others. You're returning to yourself. You're stepping back from external noise to hear your own frequency again. Think of it like energetic hygiene. Just as your physical body needs showers, your emotional and energetic body needs silence, needs pause, needs space. Because energy clings, you absorb more than you realize from texts, timelines, conversations, glances, unspoken expectations, unresolved dynamics. And when you never step back, you never detox. You keep responding from residue from other people's projections and your own outdated scripts. That's why sacred isolation isn't a luxury. It's a requirement, a reset, a reconnection, a remembering. Ritual of aloneness for energetic recalibration. Here's a simple but powerful practice. Set aside 1 hour this week. Block it off like a meeting. Make it sacred. This is your ritual of aloneness. What you do during this hour is less important than how you hold the space. But here's a structure: turn off all notifications. Digital silence is step 1 in tuning into energetic clarity. Choose a setting that feels neutral or nourishing. A quiet room, a park, your car, anywhere that feels like it belongs to you. Bring nothing that requires input. No podcasts, no texts, no scrolling. Just space. Ask a question aloud or in your journal. What part of me have I ignored lately? Then sit with it. Let the answer come or not. The silence is the medicine. End with a conscious grounding ritual. This can be a few deep breaths, a walk, or even placing a hand on your chest and saying, I'm here. I see me. I honor this space. This isn't about solving anything. It's about remembering who you are when no one needs anything from you. When you're not reacting, when you're not explaining, when you're not managing anything but your own breath. Here's what often happens. At first, the silence is uncomfortable. Your mind races. You feel the urge to check something. You remember a conversation. You rehearse a future confrontation. That's residue. Let it pass. Because underneath that static is something sacred. Your true frequency. Your unperformed self. The part of you that doesn't care about being impressive, useful, perfect, or strong. The part of you that just wants to be without effort. without edit. And the more time you spend there, the stronger the signal gets. You begin to remember what you like, not what others praise, what you need, not what others expect, what you value, not what keeps others comfortable. This is where emotional sovereignty begins, not in loud declarations, but in quiet recognition. You begin to realize, I'm not lonely. I'm clearing the space where I lost myself in other people's noise. And when you re-emerge, you do so differently. Not hardened, not distant, but rooted, selective, clear. You're no longer available in ways that cost you your center. You don't rejoin the world out of guilt. You rejoin when your energy says yes. And that changes everything. Because when people meet the version of you who no longer trades time for validation, attention for identity, or availability for worth, they adjust. Or they exit. And both outcomes are sacred. Because isolation isn't punishment. It's preparation. It's where you practice the courage to exist without performing, to be whole without being helpful, to be full without being accessed. And that, more than anything, is what your nervous system has been begging for. It's not only rest or space, it's the right to be yourself without explanation. They're not threatened by your anger. They're threatened by your silence. Because silence chosen consciously isn't passive. It's provocative. It creates a void. And in that void, everything projected onto you suddenly loses its anchor. You see, most people don't relate to you. They relate to the version of you that fits the script in their head. The one who comforts without being asked, the one who reacts predictably, the one who smooths tension, absorbs blame, and always knows how to keep the peace. That's not intimacy. That's projection. Projection is the unconscious act of turning someone into a character in your personal narrative. And when you've lived most of your life playing the roles others cast you in, the caretaker, the cool-headed one, the strong friend, you eventually forget you're even in costume. But when you start dropping the script, when your yes becomes rarer, when your presence becomes less available, when your tone flattens from people-pleasing to neutrality, people don't say, "Wow, you're evolving." They say, "You've changed." And they don't say it with admiration. They say it with resistance. Because when you stop performing, you stop being controllable. And when you're no longer easy to read, you become unpredictable. And in systems built on familiarity and compliance, unpredictability feels like danger. So they get agitated. They poke. They prod. They escalate. Not to hurt you, but to restore the version of you that used to soothe their discomfort. It's not always malicious. Often, it's unconscious. They're trying to retrieve the character you stopped playing. And when that no longer works, the projection collapses. And what's left is real relationship, or nothing. Either way, clarity wins. Let's go deeper. A projection is never about who you are. It's about what someone else needs you to be in order to avoid looking at themselves. If they need control, they'll project helplessness onto you. If they fear abandonment, they'll cast you as the betrayer. If they want to avoid guilt, they'll call you selfish the moment you say no. But none of that is you. That's them projecting unprocessed pain onto your silence. And when you stop reacting, you stop feeding the illusion. You stop playing the role. You stop being their mirror. and they have no choice but to see themselves. That's why silence feels threatening. Not because it's mean, but because it removes the buffer. It says, I no longer participate in a dynamic that erases who I really am. And in that void, they either meet the real you or they leave. Both outcomes are sacred, because the only relationships worth keeping are the ones that survive your authenticity. The practice of lucid silence. Let's talk about a skill that very few people master: lucid silence. Lucid silence is not the cold shoulder. It's not shutting down. It's not emotional manipulation. Lucid silence is a conscious refusal to over-explain, to over-defend, or to over-function. It's the choice to be still, even when you're misunderstood. It's the awareness that some moments don't need your voice. They need your vibration. Here's how to practice it. When provoked, pause. Before you respond to a guilt trip, accusation, or emotional bait, take one full breath. Let the urge to defend settle into the ground. Scan the moment. Ask yourself, is this a conversation or a trap? Is this an invitation to clarity or chaos? Choose presence over performance. Instead of jumping into rescue mode or damage control, stay. Let the silence speak on your behalf. Let your boundaries be felt, not explained. Hold your energy steady. Imagine your nervous system like a calm lake. If the other person throws a stone, don't ripple right away. Let their gesture reveal them, not define you. Exit the stage gracefully. If the conversation becomes coercive, circular, or manipulative, choose the power, move, exit without drama. Not to punish, but to protect the version of you that no longer lives for external approval. Lucid silence is maturity. It's discipline. It's emotional clarity dressed as non-reaction. It doesn't scream, I'm above this. It whispers, I no longer need to be understood to honor myself. Here's the paradox. When you were reactive, they felt powerful. When you become neutral, they feel disoriented. But neutrality isn't indifference. It's sovereignty. It's a boundary, a recalibration, a declaration that says, I am no longer accessible in the places where I was once exploited. And yes, you will be misunderstood. You will be called distant, cold, or different. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer easy to manipulate. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer playing the version of you I depended on. And that's not your responsibility. That's their reckoning. Because every projection eventually fails. Every fantasy dissolves. And only truth remains. So here's your reminder. You don't owe anyone access to the version of you they created in their mind. You only owe them one thing, your truth. And if that's too much for them, they were never really loving you. They were loving their illusion of you. So let the projections collapse. Let the misunderstandings land. Let the old versions of you die quietly in your silence. And in their place, let your presence do the speaking. Because in a world that rewards performance, the most rebellious act is to be real and unbothered. Rebirth rarely looks like triumph. It often looks like undoing. It doesn't come with fireworks, or clarity, or some epic moment of arrival. Sometimes, rebirth is quiet. It feels like confusion, like detachment, like stillness that you don't yet know how to trust. It begins the moment you stop performing, but don't yet know how to be real. It's the space between old reflexes and new choices, between the version of you that everyone expects and the version of you that's still becoming. This is where you start to realize you don't need to be better. You need to be honest. You need to be whole, because self-improvement is endless. But self-remembrance, that's liberation. Let's be clear, the version of you who people relied on, praised, or idealized wasn't false. It was incomplete. It was the survival self crafted through experience, feedback, and expectation. But now, you're not surviving anymore. You're being asked to live fully, rootedly, unapologetically. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of integrating your unconscious, of reclaiming the lost fragments of self, of becoming not the person the world trained you to be, but the person you already were beneath the masks, the coping, and the roles. Individuation isn't about becoming special. It's about becoming authentic, returning to your natural shape, not shrinking for comfort, not stretching for approval, not camouflaging to remain digestible, but inhabiting your exact size energetically, emotionally, spiritually, without apology. This is the true rebirth. Not louder, not grander, just truer. And it doesn't begin with action. It begins with permission. To stop fixing, to stop perfecting, to stop managing your identity like a product you're marketing, because you're not a performance. You're not a persona. You're a presence. So what does living without performance look like? It looks like this: saying no without a 3-paragraph justification, resting without guilt, letting your voice shake when you speak the truth, showing up messy, unclear, or emotionally honest without apology, refusing to shrink into roles that no longer fit. And it also looks like creating something that isn't designed to impress, just express, choosing relationships that nourish, not drain, taking time to hear your own voice before amplifying anyone else's, releasing identities that were rewarded but never real, living in a way that feels aligned even when it's inconvenient. And yes, this will cost you something. It might cost you old dynamics, old validations, old applause, old friendships built on your silence, not your soul. But what you gain is everything the performance could never give you: clarity, peace, coherence, self-trust. The things that only arrive when you stop outsourcing your worth and start listening to the truth inside your own bones. And make no mistake, it will be lonely at first. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because the room always clears when you stop performing for others' comfort. You might notice the texts slow down, the conversations dry up, the energy shifts. Let it. That's the silence where your soul has space to speak again. From coping to creating. Let's make this real. You've spent years coping, managing stress, fitting into environments not designed for your nervous system, playing roles that served everyone except your soul. But now, the invitation is different. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming sovereign. And sovereignty begins with moving from reaction to creation. Ask yourself, what would I build if I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood? What kind of relationship would I choose if I didn't need to be needed? What kind of life would feel quietly correct, even if no one clapped? These aren't questions of productivity. They're questions of frequency. You are a vibrational being. And the more you align your choices with your true signal, the more your life begins to reflect who you actually are, not who you were trained to be. This is the architecture of rebirth. It's not an event. It's a direction, a decision you make again and again to choose truth over performance, to choose alignment over approval, to choose wholeness over applause. Here's what most people get wrong. They think rebirth means becoming powerful in a new way. But really, rebirth means reclaiming the power you abandoned in order to survive. The power of your voice, your boundaries, your rhythm, your presence. It's not about changing who you are. It's about changing what you accept. It's about refusing to betray yourself just to keep the peace, keep the title, keep the narrative, keep the illusion. Because peace that costs your truth is just silence dressed up as safety. You're not here to disappear behind your own life. You're here to be the one who writes it. So here's your invitation. Stop trying to become someone you're not. Start becoming someone you recognize. Someone who doesn't perform to be loved. Someone who doesn't sacrifice clarity for belonging. Someone who doesn't tolerate anything that asks them to abandon their soul for the sake of being digestible. You've done enough surviving. You've earned this return, this reclamation, this rebuild. And the next version of you, it won't be created in response to the world. It will be crafted from within. You'll stop asking, "What do they want me to be?" and start asking, "What feels real in my bones?" That is the rebirth. Not of someone new, but of someone remembered. If you've made it this far, that's not an accident. That's alignment. That's your soul whispering. It's time. Time to stop performing. Time to stop over-explaining. Time to stop proving your worth in rooms that only echo what they expect to hear. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer. You don't need to explain yourself. You need to express yourself in your tone, in your silence, in your boundaries, in your choices. Because at this point in your journey, you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be true to yourself. Let the old dynamics fall away. Let the roles expire. Let the masks crumble. You've already outgrown the places that mistake your stillness for absence. And that's not selfish. It's sacred. It means you've evolved. And evolution often arrives through stillness, not noise. So here's your moment. Drop the words, "New me" in the comments if you're done shrinking, done explaining, and ready to move. I speak. And choose from your wholeness, not your history. You don't need to announce your growth. Your energy already does that for you. You don't need to defend your clarity. Let your alignment be your answer. This isn't the end of your story. It's the first breath of the version of you that no longer asks for permission to exist fully. And if you're ready to keep walking this path, not just forward, but deeper, here's where to go next. Subscribe to the free weekly newsletter Grounded. Honest, unfiltered writing delivered straight to your inbox. To remind you who you are when the world gets loud. Dive into the full playlist. Every video is a portal. Pick the one that speaks to where you are right now. Let it meet you exactly where you are. Let it carry you into the version of you that's waiting beneath what you've been taught. And when you're ready to unplug from the noise, return to this truth. You don't need to prove your value. You just need to stop giving it away. Protect your energy. Honor your truth. Move like you're already free.